Your worship, what's your handicap in terms of how do you think this is all going to work out? There's one side says the rules are onerous, other side says you need the rules or the taxi industry is going to suffer.
Well, this is a very strange thing because certainly Uber's history in every jurisdiction that they operate in is they always say we can't possibly operate under these rules, and then they operate under those rules. In fact, it's funny because last fall they were complaining vociferously about Edmonton's rules and how Edmonton's rules were completely unworkable, completely onerous, and now they're telling us, please adopt Edmonton's rules. So the point is that we have to come up with smart regulation here. And in particular, there are 4 points that Uber is complaining about. Number one is inspections. I actually agree with them that if you're driving your car part-time, you probably don't need an inspection every 6 months. That's $100 in an hour. But still, you probably don't need to do that every 6 months. So I'll look for an amendment today to make that annual unless you're driving a certain number of kilometers. Their second concern is around police background checks. They're claiming that their background checks are good enough, but they just had to pay a $28.5 million settlement in the US for making too many claims about their background checks. And in fact, we know very well that at least one driver here in Calgary made it through their background check despite having an active assault charge in front of them. So it's not good enough. The police background check is rigorous and it's fast. $30 and you can get it in 10 business days. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Their third concern is about fees. On this, I agree with them that the per car fee is probably not the best way to do this when you have a lot of people driving part-time. The problem is they haven't given us a legitimate alternative. We've suggested many alternatives. They've rejected them all. And the only alternative they brought is one that pays less than Edmonton. And our models very clearly show that Edmonton won't cover its costs. And I don't think anybody wants the taxpayers to subsidize a company like Uber. The bylaw today is really a modernization of the entire taxi industry in a way that a lot of people have been asking for. Uber is actually just one part of it. Our ride sharing is just one part of it. And I think it's a good common sense bylaw, and certainly the regulations that we're proposing today are all focused on safety and are certainly far less onerous than in many jurisdictions where Uber operates.
So Mayor, what's the best case scenario here? Because on Friday, Uber had said specifically to council to not take this recommendation by the city, to go back to the drawing board. In your mind, what's the best case scenario?
Going back to the drawing board without passing anything is not helpful, in my opinion. Council may choose to do that. I don't think they will. Because the point is, we've had hundreds of hours of meetings with Uber. They've not been willing to compromise. So I'm willing to compromise on the vehicle inspections. I'm willing to compromise on the driver license language. I'm not willing to compromise on the background check. And if they come up with a better fee proposal between now and April when the bylaw comes into place, I'm very happy to look at that and bring it to council if necessary.
How did the city catch this one driver as an active assault charge?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I wish I did because I've been asking. It sounds very cloak and dagger to me. I don't know, but I do know that it happened.
And so insurance is also a key issue for you.
Yes, insurance is a really important issue, but it's interesting that Uber has acquiesced on the insurance question. For some months, they claim to have better insurance than anyone in the business. They've stopped claiming that. They've agreed that they need the insurance. In fact, they sent out an email blitz to people asking them to pressure the superintendent of insurance to approve the new insurance product. So the insurance will sort itself out. It may not sort itself out in time for Edmonton's bylaw coming into place on March 1st. I hope it'll sort itself out by the time our bylaw comes into place.
You said that you take this service quite often when you visit other cities. What do you think of this service?
It's a good service, and in a particular way, it's very, very helpful. And it's very, very helpful because precisely that if you have part-time drivers who are insured and pass a background check, who only want to work on Friday or Saturday nights, who only want to work on New Year's Eve, who only want to work on hockey day games, it's actually extremely helpful to make the network more flexible. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get there in a place where we can provide that. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's fine. It's good. It's not, a Star Trek transporter beam getting you where you want to go. But I think we can get there. And in fact, I think that the regulations that we're providing today, we've had a couple of small rideshare providers say they'd be happy to work under those regulations and would want to enter the Calgary market. And I'm hopeful that a couple of the larger ones, when they look at international expansion, will see our rules as very good rules under which they could operate as well. So I've taken Uber, I've taken Lyft in different places, and Lyft just got a big cash infusion from General Motors. They're looking at expansion, and I would welcome them to Calgary.
You sounded asking your questions somewhat frustrated by the fact that Uber's being portrayed as in a way that you're being hard on.
I don't like misinformation. And to claim that it's easier to get a fire license than a $30 firearms license than a $30 police check from the Calgary Police Service, that's just not helpful. It has been very difficult to deal with them, but the funny thing is that they follow the same playbook in every jurisdiction, as though the jurisdictions don't talk to one another. They try this everywhere. And in this case, we're going to put in regulations that protect people, and there are regulations that Uber has shown that they can work under all over the world. And so for them to claim they're impossible in Calgary when they work under much harder regulations in New York and in Houston and in New Zealand and in Berlin and in Lisbon and all these other places, it's a bit ridiculous.
Why do you sense they're doing that? Is it a case of they'll try to get as little regulation as they can, or what's the reason?
That's very much been their history. They started by saying that there should be no regulation at all. Now they say they welcome regulation. And in other jurisdictions, this has been their history. But we're going to set some very basic rules. You got to have your car inspected. You got to have a police check. You got to have insurance. And I think that no Calgarian will disagree with those rules. And if those are rules that they find very difficult, well, Lyft has my phone number too. All right.
Any other topics?
On any other topics?
Mayor, on fluoride,
Yes.
Mayor Nenshi, what's your view about putting it back in the water in light of last week's study comparing Edmonton cavity rates to Calgary's?
Well, I wouldn't make the decision based on that one study. I'll remind you that I voted against taking it out, and I was very much in favor of engaging more science on this and doing some very big lit reviews. I still think that's a good idea to do. I have, however, said many times to dentists and others who have been concerned about this that if you really want to get this onto the ballot in 2017, there is a process to get a plebiscite done. And if you were to put a petition on the front counter of every dentist's office, I suspect you'd get your signatures pretty quickly. That said, council voted pretty overwhelmingly. I was in the minority. The council voted pretty overwhelmingly to remove fluoride from the water. So I'm not sure that there will be a political answer here. But people always have the right to put something to plebiscite if that's what they want.
Were you not absent from that vote?
No, actually, that's a misnomer, and I didn't want to correct you about it, but I will, because there were actually a number of votes. There was one vote that instructed administration to draft a bylaw, but the actual vote was the bylaw itself, which happened, I believe, in March and May 2011, and I was there.
Would you vote yourself in a plebiscite? Would you vote in favor of putting fluoride back?
Today, based on the science that we've got, I would vote in favor of putting it back, but I really would like to see a bigger lit study. I know that there is some work from the Harvard School of Public Health in relation with China that looks at fluoridation levels in China and their impact on children, but that the levels of the fluoride in the water there were not clear to me on my first cursory look. So I would love to have a little bit more of a lit review of all of the research that's been done on this, but based on what I know today, I'd vote in the plebiscite to put it back.
One last question,
Quick
folks.
question in French, maybe,
Oui.
about Uber. Qu'est-ce qui vous préoccupe? Quelles sont les inquiétudes qui sont soulevées par Uber? Essayez de regarder.
Pour moi, c'est très, très important qu'il y ait des règlements qui ont assuré que tous les gens qui conduisent pour Uber et tous les passagers sont sécures. C'est tout. C'est simplement tout. Et pour moi, tous les règlements qu'on discute aujourd'hui, c'est tout de ça.